How formal should this be? Am I just talking?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here. You obviously know my name, but I'm Anna Jane. This is my thesis defense. The title is Social Media as the Medium and Its Effects on Political Discourse. My thesis director is Dr. Janice Pope. Liz Kunkel is my second reader. Thank you all for being here. Before I dive in, I guess I'll go this way with it. It's been a long semester of research, tears, stress, writing. So I want to talk about why I wanted to do this. So the motivation behind my research. I'm partially a millennial, partially Generation Z, depending on how you want to define it. So I grew up with social media. I've watched it evolve, and so I've seen how people have changed their social interactions to online communication. I've seen how businesses have shifted their marketing to online campaigning, and obviously political campaigns also have transitioned to that from traditional media outlets. And I've focused, my 4 years kind of on the interpersonal communication side of how we're affected by that shift of digital communication and all of that. So that's kind of my personal side of it. And then why would we revisit the presidential 2016 election? Why not, honestly? It's been a year and a half pretty much since that, and it's still such a relevant topic, maybe the most relevant, but that's my opinion, and maybe some other people. And it's something that you see, every day on Facebook, every day on Twitter, something you see on the news if you have cable, if you're lucky enough. It's super relevant. Social media, it's the main space for the political discussion for this election, which is something that's super different from elections in the past. It's where we processed it, we argued, we debated, just depends on how you took the information for it all. Many attribute the outcome of the election to how candidates used social media, also Cambridge Analytica, now that's come out, so that's something that people are still processing now, and it's just a personal fascination of mine. A lot of my friends hear me talk about it frequently. So, a little history behind all of that. Here's a quick video. Ooh. Okay. I didn't even check the sound.
Politicians are spending more and more money on social media, but is it worth it? Last year, research firm Borrell Associates estimated political campaigns spent more than $1.4 billion on digital advertising in 2016. That includes ads for video, mobile, email, social media, and online searches. Hamid bin Doss, press secretary for U.S. Representative Keith Ellison, offered some insight on how effective social media is.
The social media is kind of more of a direct pathway of getting your message out there.
To reach voters online, especially young voters, politicians and staffers try to use blunt and authentic language that's responsive to the news. That's trickier than you'd think, but a key to using social media seems to be consistency.
And I think that's where you kind of see politicians with very concrete ideological platforms and very concrete ideas or visions of what they want to see this country be.
Politicians who've had some success on social media include Ted Lieu, whose 2017 tweet apparently won most viral post during a House Democrats online all-star competition to gain new followers on social media. Another politician who does well on social platforms online, President Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is pushing 1 billion Twitter mentions.
I tweeted today, @RealDonaldTrump, I tweet.
I have my own form of media.
Of course, there are drawbacks to politicians using social media. Before the 2016 presidential election, the Pew Research Center found more than a third of social media users surveyed were, quote, worn out by the amount of political content they encounter. During the 2016 election, a recent study found political content on Facebook and Twitter was more partisan and unreliable than the news media. For politicians, bin Doss says the risk of creating partisan echo chambers is real, but says they can avoid that by speaking directly to voters as a whole instead of targeted audiences.
So that's a little background and how they use all of it. I think I have to click that to keep moving. So like it said in the video, we're kind of shifting into a place where millennials and younger generations are the main voters now, and they use social media. So candidates are really focusing on that direct path to voters. And in the 2012 presidential election, we saw that rise of political advertisements. Obama was using Twitter. It was more of a one-way type of advertisement at that point, and we really saw the two-way interactive political campaigning in the 2016 election with hashtags, Facebook Live videos. You could see those profile picture frames, like I'm with her, Trump train. So that discussion of politics really shifted online with the election, whether it was between voters, with people involved in the campaign, and even with the candidates and voters themselves. So that leads me to my research question. With all of this discussion shifting online, did social media improve or hurt online conversation? So for my research, I did a literature review on 3 different articles, and then I took the information from that, formed a moderator guide with a bunch of questions for 2 different groups, and did a focus group, concluded all of that, which I'll touch on in a little bit. So for the literature review, the 3 articles that I did were social media and fake news in the 2016 election, social media rumors as improvised public opinion, semantic network analyses of Twitter discourses during Korean saber rattling 2013, and social media as a public sphere, politics on social media. So they kind of have a few things that tie them together, but why I chose them was based off of content, the relevancy to social media, and the political climate, either or both, and then the methods of research that they had in all of them. So the themes that I found from those were social media is the new public sphere for discussion and forming ideas for political change. And public sphere, defined in the article, social media as a public sphere, is a space where people come together to discuss ideas in hopes for new political change. And so that's the new space for it online. You typically see it in traditional spheres as a forum face-to-face physically, and now we have moved online for that. The second one is public opinions formed online represent a more accurate general consensus than polling can capture. What I mean by that is polling doesn't allow as much access as social media can give now, because with social media, all you need is internet access. That doesn't necessarily mean a phone or computer. You can do an internet cafe, you can borrow a phone from somebody, whereas with polling, sometimes you need the address, a place to access where to poll. So the third one is the spread of fake news affects the civil nature of discourse on social media. So fake news articles do tend to be more controversial in their tone, their content, and their language, which affects the hostile nature of how people discuss it, which leads me to the final one. So social media as a space for political discourse has evolved into disrespectful speech, enough that people choose to withhold from discussing politics altogether. So I gathered that from all 3 of them, specifically from social media as a public sphere, that article where they interviewed 30 people. Their final question talked about if they enjoyed talking about and if they would continue to talk about politics online, and all of them said that they refrained at this point because it turned so hostile. So I took all of that information. Oh, I forgot about these. So these are 2 examples of Russian Facebook groups. I think it's interesting to note that it was really hard for me to find ones that were related to Trump. I had to go through at least 2 pages of Google Images, and I just couldn't find any that were worthy of presenting. So I think that has something to say about Cambridge Analytica, the ties to Russia and Trump and all of that. So you can just see the polarizing language just in the pictures of all of this. This one doesn't even have Hillary in it, but you can just tell the conservative ties that it has to it. So I took this to a focus group. I did it in late March. I did 2 of them. One was with 4 faculty members from different departments on Appalachian's campus. The other one was with 7 students from this campus as well. It was here in Walker's conference room. They were both about 90 minutes, offered pizza, which probably helped a lot of people come. I used an audio Zoom recorder, and in the student one, it died, so I used an Evernote application, which was really awesome for recording long-term sessions. So my questions were background setup questions to start and set the premises for all of it. Then I went into a section about their perceptions of politics on social media. Some of those questions were, what kinds of posts on social media made you consider unfollowing or unfriending people? How would you define fake news, and how do you think that affects discussion online? I moved into the concept of echo chambers, so I gave them a definition, and we talked about how that affects, how they see news online and the outcome of the election. And then I moved finally into the comparison of discourse before and after the election. So what do you think the differences were on how people interact before and after? And then my final question was, what do you think social media's role in the next election will be? So I concluded some results from that. The first one is generational differences play a role in social media habits. What I mean by that is the age at which different generations began using social media shapes their online habits. So both groups started using and have used social media for about the same amount of time, about 10 to 11 years, but the age at which they started was different, and that plays a major role. So for younger people, myself included, I was 10 to 11, so we needed parents' permission, to use it, versus college people and above. So how often they use it? Students in that age group, they're using it for 3 or more hours mindlessly scrolling, as they would say, versus faculty in that other group were using their time intentionally on social media. What they see online, the content in relation to political posts. Younger generations are seeing more political memes and just, catchier things to grab their attention, versus phrases for older generations like Hillary or Trump train, just more depth in the content for that. And then how they interact with others online, which I will touch on later, but when you start using social media, so for the faculty and above, with older generations, you had learned interpersonal communication beforehand, which helps you learn how to solve conflicts, versus with me and people my age, you've grown up on social media, you're more accustomed to the cues of social media and stuff like that. So it just definitely affects how you're using it and interacting with people online. The next one is the creation of echo chambers on social media. So I took this definition from, which article was that? The social media as a public sphere. That was where that one was from. So it's defined as the constant reiteration of similar ideas, creating an echo of one opinion without room for rebuttal. So environments shape personal echo chambers, but there's a difference in what shapes it for each different group. So for younger generations, in my focus groups, they attributed more physical environments. So they said that their friend groups physically shaped how their social media environments created echo chambers. So for instance, the friend groups that they surrounded themselves with felt that reflected who they saw and what content was reflected on social media. Versus the older age groups, faculty members, they placed most of the credit to the algorithms on Facebook, and it was more of a conclusion that they came to at the end. They were like, wow, we tailored to our own echo chambers as well. So it goes back to how younger generations are more aware of the fact that they tailor to their own echo chambers versus older generations who aren't as aware of the habits and how they affect your echo chambers online. This is another great video because it makes sense for how echo chambers work with some nice graphics. It's very short as well.
Social media is creating a new kind of political divide. And when you unfriend someone over a political argument, you're making that divide even deeper. I'll explain. This is your real-life social circle. Family, friends, classmates, coworkers. Many of these people are likely from a similar background as you and have a similar worldview. But your social newsfeed takes that to a new level. Facebook's algorithm promotes the types of posts that you like and share, and it hides away posts that put you off or that you don't interact with. This means you're unwittingly surrounding yourself with more people and news sites that just confirm your pre-existing views. This is called an echo chamber. It means you're only seeing ideas from people and media outlets who agree with you. And I'll let you in on a secret of social video and news. A lot of the new media industry is built off of the social share, and the easiest way to win that share from you is to confirm and vindicate your views. That's led to a boom in the number of news sites that push out clearly biased and sensational headlines. They know you'll like it and that you're likely to share it. Don't subject yourself to hate speech, but when it comes to political disagreements, You can avoid the echo chamber by actually hearing people out and interacting with people who have different viewpoints on social media. Be careful about cutting people out of your social networks over politics. You're cutting yourself off from different views, and you're cutting others off from your views. And you're contributing to that increasing polarization in America. For Newsy, I'm Zach Toombs.
So that's a good example, the visual of it, which helps, for people who haven't heard of that. So both groups, after I gave the definition of an echo chamber, were familiar with that but had never heard of the term. So I thought that was really interesting as well. I wonder if this will work. No? Okay. All right. There we go. Bear with me, everyone. So that moves me on to the discussion. So these are my conclusions from the results that I found. So the first one is that the generational differences that I touched on earlier, they create a disconnect that acts as a barrier for rich political discourse online. So the generational differences I'm talking about, they have to do with how people communicate online. So for older generations, when I talked about how they had more time to develop their interpersonal communication skills, they have trouble translating those interpersonal skills to online discussion, which creates a disconnect, one between each other of that generation and also with younger generations. So that's one disconnect. Older generations are known to engage more than those younger generations, but it does typically lead to arguments, which, that doesn't go well. So younger generations, like myself, we've grown up with social media, and we tend to become more apathetic when we just hit unfollow and we block, because that's how we've grown up with it. We're just more apt to using social media. And so with that, that's just a barrier in itself that social media has taught us to use. And so these are just a few barriers, one with us interacting with each other, and then again with older generations as well. And both groups, they did agree that the medium of social media just doesn't create richness in its conversation. And so I have a graphic for that. That's media richness theory. And so you can see this is the spectrum of effectiveness in communication. I couldn't find anything that was as up-to-date that showed social media in it because nothing's there yet. But you can see that face-to-face obviously shows the most effective in communication. I'd probably throw social media in between like telephone and maybe written and addressed. But as you head down it, you can see that once you lose face-to-face communication, even hearing somebody, you're losing the richness in the conversation. You're losing the cues that you're hearing from somebody. So both agree that that is a problem, but they just come at it from different perspectives that create barriers. The second one is the creation of echo chambers on social media has reinforced political polarization and disconnect between different groups. So echo chambers for younger people goes back to us quickly unfollowing people, tailoring to our own echo chambers. And then by older generations, the lack of awareness for the fact that we also tend to our own echo chambers along with the algorithms of Facebook has a big deal with echo chambers as well. And so this creates more polarized communities, like I said, and it also creates less room for access to diverse opinions, which is key for political discourse. And so the final one is that the dissemination of fake news changes the way users interact with one another by hosting spaces for hostile discourse, furthering polarization online. Kind of goes off on a different way, but it definitely has to do with political discourse. And fake news affects our interactions because now that we know that fake news was so major in this election, we are weary of trusting the news that we see online. It said that in the first video that people are tired of everything. And I even would say traditional media as well. You just don't know what to trust. And so even if someone posts an article that could be true, you don't know at this point. And so you automatically discredit that person, and then that changes the way you speak to them. It could be derogatory, hostile, you could be speaking down to them. That creates that barrier, and then your discourse is disconnected at that point. And so, what does all this mean together? Social media as a medium for political discourse, it needs work. As an ideal, social media for space for discourse, it worked in its innocent beginnings. It was a place for connection, for creating global places for discussion, that public sphere that I referenced earlier. But with all these disconnects, generational, partisan, adding fake news into all of it, they create all these disconnects that, create this work that we need to, break down the barriers for true discussion. And if we don't get back to that, there's no way to get back to giving the power to people to share and make the world more connected, like Mark Zuckerberg said. So that's the end of my discussion. These are all my references. There's like 3 pages of it. Another page. I do want to thank a few people. Dr. Pope, thanks for everything. All the time you gave, the encouragement, reading, all the hugs we ended our meetings with. Liz, thanks for all the encouragement and reading through all of it. My parents really couldn't be here, but they're always challenging me to be better and challenge myself as well. David Patterson, he's the man that always organized my chaotic thoughts over phone calls. My sister Karen, she gives me words of wisdom every day, and she helps me through all of this. The members of my focus group, I wouldn't have come to these conclusions without their answers. All my friends who, they talked me through my thoughts, they supported me with anything, they drove me places, they just did it all. And then Toby, my dog, he was the shoulder to cry on and the man to pet. So I want to open it up for any questions that y'all have. So.
I do have a question about, I think the echo chambers was the most interesting part for me, because I think that we're all in one, and that's not a term that I'd ever heard before until looking at your paper. So I guess my question to you is, because I'm sure that you during the election and everything had people posting stuff of opposite viewpoint. I mean, how did you, do you think that you're in an echo chamber, or how do you respond to that kind of stuff? I mean, do you think that we're all in an echo chamber, or is there really a way to not be in an echo chamber?
I think that at the end of all this research, after listening to the focus groups and everything, I never unfollowed or blocked anybody, mostly because it was family members, and I feel like that's just something you can't do. But it just never, and I think coming from a communication aspect, just growing up in that as a college student, it's just so important, and I've just learned that through all of this, to hear what other people have to say, and I just think that's a fundamental thing, not a political thing. And so we all are thrown into our own echo chambers, but to become aware of that is how we move out of breaking and, increasing the echo chamber and allowing those different opinions in. I think that there were aspects of my own feed that were parts of an echo chamber, but I really feel like I let other opinions in, but I didn't engage too much. I would say that I wouldn't say apathetic, but I just didn't engage. I observed more than that, so.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Cool.
A lurker.
That's me. John Luke?
Yes, so again, great presentation. You had mentioned that there were some aspects along your journey that you personally, struggled with, that helped you overcome a lot of things. So if you don't mind sharing with us a time where, the most impactful thing that happened through that suffering of your research and how you personally overcame that.
I think it was like right before I started writing everything. I just was looking at all the information I had, and I had no idea how to process all of it. And it just took 5-ish days of looking through all of it and listening to all of the audio, and you just have to keep powering through it. And then I came to this conclusion. Abby was in the library with me, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I came to it, and then I ran to class, and that was the rewarding feeling after finding that conclusion. Really made all of the stress and the sleepless nights and all of that really worth it, because there was a lot of that stress. So, but it took a while to come to that conclusion. I definitely talked to Dr. Pope a lot about, I don't know what I'm thinking. And actually another thing I would say is I drew out a lot of my thoughts and arrowed them together. So that's what I would do, but that's how my mind works. So you just kind of have to figure out how your research works for you.
Okay, gotcha.
So, yeah.
Where do you think, I don't know what you want to do with this. This is an interesting study, that obviously is almost more like a pre-study.
That's,
do something big.
It's just the beginning.
Yeah, right. So where do you think you'd want to take this?
I think I'd like to go, there's a few ways that you could dive deeper into it. I think I'd like to find groups and dive deeper into groups, maybe racially. I'd like to go more into how like with older generations, what aspects of their interpersonal communication affects how they communicate online. I have so many and I totally forgot all of them now. But there's just so many, there's a lot that more of, like the echo chambers was just such an interesting concept that I really would love to go into more. And maybe, you know, who knows where it will take me if I go back to grad school or anything like that. But I really would like to go back and study more of it. But time really was the biggest time constraint, like we talked about. If I had time for more focus groups, I think I would have come to more conclusions to dive into deeper research. So, yeah. Anything else?
Do you think like 10 years down the road, like this research will still be relevant, or do you think?
I think the concept of it will, but I think there will be a lot of factors that will have evolved within it.
What do you think specifically will evolve?
The medium itself. Something else will have popped up that we will discuss politics in. Because, I mean, think about 10 years, 12-ish years before, we were talking about politics mostly like via TV and then face-to-face. And then we just evolved to talking online with each other. So I have no idea where it will go from here, but I know that it's going to go somewhere else. So,
Gotcha.
Who knows?
I want to say one thing I liked about your paper was you talked about it evolving, because there were times where I wanted to say, did you mean devolving? But I think that is really important to keep it positive like that it is evolving. And I think quite often people, especially people my age, older generations, think, oh, this is a devolution in our communication abilities. But I think that's just because we bring our own frameworks to bear, which is not to say that interpersonal won't always be the most important way. But I do think, you know, even when we look to virtual reality and artificial intelligence, that the way we think about communication is expansive in that way. And so it is an evolution, not a devolution. So I thought that was nice. I liked that.
And I thought, at the end of writing everything, I felt there was a thought in my mind that there are points where social media has improved how we talked about it, and I could have gone in that way, but I did want to focus more on the negative parts